From Anderson Silva, who was never the same after his leg injury, to an Iceman who never knew when to call it quits. Let's take a look at some washed-up fighters who should have retired. First off, Donald Cerrone gave much of his life up for the Hall of Fame. Seeing that all it did was add losses to his record, he didn't even need to fight for the last couple of years. Look, I'm a fan of Cowboy just as much as the next guy. What's not to love? He had over 50 professional fights and holds the records for most finishes and most victories in the UFC. But his willingness to take on any fighter at any location is what we remember most about him, even if it's on short notice. Sadly, it's what became his undoing. Cowboy had all the skills to become the champion of champions, and his victories over the likes of Benson Henderson and Eddie Alvarez prove it. Still, he always choked in the big fights. He was cursed to fight to survive and fought for years, longer than what was best for his health to make enough retirement money. He lost 6 of his last 7 fights, and the only one that didn't end with Cowboy's hat hanging was a no contest against Nico Price. He fought a lot of big names in the tail of his career, even getting a red panty night when Conor returned to the welterweight division. But all he managed to do was swell his retirement fund. Similarly, Anderson Silva didn't need the money. He kept going for the love of the game. That's one of the things that makes the Spider's career so tragic. To this day, everybody admits that when Anderson was at his peak in the middleweight division, there wasn't a fighter that could touch him. But fate doesn't always account for glory, and Anderson broke his leg in a devastating fashion against Chris Weidman when they had their rematch. That one moment triggered a spiral in the fighter's career that didn't end till 2020. He healed, of course, and made a comeback against Nick Diaz. It was a great fight. Silva looked good and got the decision. Unfortunately, he tested positive for the steroids he used to speed up his recovery, and the decision was overturned. He fought Michael Bisping in London, but fate again intervened when Bisping's mouthpiece fell out. The mishap gave Anderson the chance to knock down a distracted Bisping and celebrate before the referee ever stopped the fight. Bisping came back from the wobble to win a historic decision in his home country. But Silva never really came back from that fight. He got manhandled by Cormier before a solitary win against Derek Brunson, but then dropped fight after fight to a newer generation of fighters. He finally hung up his gloves in 2020, but returned to strap on a pair of boxing gloves because he loved fighting too much. Thank God Anderson was really good at slipping punches and didn't take that much damage throughout his career. But the Iceman wasn't so lucky. Chuck Liddell's fighting style, admit it or not, gave him serious head trauma. Taking too many shots to the head at the start of your career has more than one problem, and they don't just stop at the obvious harms of brain trauma. Chuck had a nuclear bomb in his right hand, and he knew that if he landed a single shot clean, he could knock anybody's lights out. He used this superpower to get 7 straight knockouts during his title reign and earned a nasty reputation inside the cage.
Randy might be hurt. Yeah, Randy might be hurt. Randy trying to close in though now. And he goes down. He's down.
Top dogs like Alistair Overeem, Tito Ortiz, Randy Couture, Vitor Belfort, Wanderlei Silva, and many more bit the dust in front of the Iceman. But so many wars with so many greats, coupled with his habit of taking a shot to land a shot, took their toll on Liddell. All of a sudden, Chuck lost his chin and became really easy to knock out, a common defense mechanism the brain develops to stop the body from taking more damage. 4 brutal knockouts in his final 6 fights.
Inside the Mandalay Bay. Chuck again, looking to finish.
Finally taught Chuck the lesson that his days passed, and he limped off into the sunset in 2010. All things considered, Chuck still got out earlier than some fighters. BJ Penn, on the other hand, tried having careers in several weight classes before calling it quits.
Probably should be fighting at 155.
And has in the past.
Yeah.
Other than when he took on Matt Hughes, basically.
I'll be the first to admit that's what made BJ one of the greatest to ever do it. If there was a weight class from 145 pounds up to heavyweight, BJ dipped his toes into it. His true greatness, however, came in the 155-pound division. Other than Khabib, he's still one of the most dominant fighters the division has seen, and he still went on to become one of the first people to beat welterweight great Matt Hughes at the height of his career. Penn tried to recreate his welterweight magic in a title fight against GSP, but received one of the worst beatdowns a fighter ever got in the UFC. BJ's true enemy was a new generation of fighters personified in Frankie Edgar.
Full display when he fought Sean. Good combo.
The little engine who came around to beat BJ in their first fight, and came back in the rematch to beat him up even worse. After that, Penn just floated around the UFC. First, he managed to get the odd victory here or there, but it became clearer each time he stepped into the cage that he was done for. He had enough weight behind his name to get a fight against Edgar, but he lost and then went on an 8-fight losing streak before finally retiring. I can understand Penn trying to hold on to past glory, but Ken Shamrock held on for no reason at all.
Comes down to grappling, I give the edge to Severn. If it comes down to punching, particularly on the feet.
The world's most dangerous man didn't really live up to his nickname. Shamrock is one of the sport's pioneering legends and gave the fans a ton of entertaining fights. But he held on longer than Cowboy, and that's saying something. Maybe you can't consider him champion because when he was at the top of UFC's heavyweight division, official weight classes and championships hadn't been introduced yet. But when they were, Ken never broke through to the top. He slowly slipped down the rankings of the UFC, losing more fights than he won. Fans had some hope after he managed to win a couple of fights after going on a 4-fight losing streak. But the UFC brass wanted to protect him from more damage, and they eventually cut him from the promotion. Rather than taking the hint and retiring, Ken moved to Bellator, where he fought and lost to a couple of other washed-up fighters. After taking the L from Royce Gracie at Bellator 149 in 2016, Ken never stepped into the cage again. Although not by much, Jens Pulver was better at taking the hint. Little Evil just couldn't handle the wrestling of the newer fighters. It's a prime example of an old dog not learning new tricks. Only this time, it cost him his reputation as a strong champion. Tons of people didn't think he deserved the title shot against Faber, and they were proven right when he dominated by the California Kid. And he never won a fight again in his life. Every time he stepped into the cage, he was taken down immediately and didn't have the technique to get back. There came a point in his career that he lost 8 out of 9 fights, the only victory winning him that title shot I mentioned. But it became clear he couldn't keep the younger lions off him. In his last 4 fights, he got finished in the first round each time. And that's as clear an indication as you'll ever get that it's time to find a different hobby. So, from Anderson Silva to Ken Shamrock, these were the washed-up fighters who should have retired.